We are live now, and welcome back to my beautiful flat. It's great to have you back. I've got a really, really lovely programme today, all on young people and well-being, and what we can do to help them. It's important because this week is Mental Health Awareness Week, and the focus of this week's week is kindness, and it's really important that everybody is kind to each other, and we try and make sure that we're maintaining all those ways of being kind to each other that are in society normally and that may be in trouble during the crisis. So I'm worried about this. We've seen today the terrible intersection that there is between lack of opportunities for young people, some of the things that we're seeing with the cuts to youth services, and then the terrible employment figures that have come through. The actual numbers are something like 800 and more people claiming unemployment benefit during April. The Resolution Foundation has said that this is hitting 18 to 24-year-old young people worse than ever. And this, I'm really worried about this in terms of mental health. When you've got stalled careers, worries about your chances in life, your hopes, your dreams, I think that can be really, really worrying for people. And then also the experience of applying for universal credit and benefits can also be really hard and really tough on your self-esteem. So once again, a call for universal basic income. We called that investing in people when we launched it during the general election. It is affordable, it is worth doing. Young people, I think in particular, really, really need it at the moment. And so yes, my message this week for Mental Health Awareness Week is let's look after each other and let's be kind. Basically, be excellent to each other. So today's programme, we've got an amazing guest. We have Hannah Graham, who is a policy manager and youth worker at a global youth charity. She's also standing as a London Assembly candidate and is a former chair of the Young Greens. She's going to talk to us about how this affects her work with young people. Now remember, we're live on Zoom, and you can ask questions in the Zoom chat. We're ready to do our best to answer you and show you some of the work that we've been doing and what Hannah's been doing as well. So let's move from amplification mode on my sofa screen. I'm going to highlight Hannah, and she should appear now. Here she is, Hannah Graham. Nice to see you. Where are you today, and what are you up to in your beautiful home there?
Oh, thanks, Sian. Great to see you too. I'm actually in Lincolnshire at my parents' home at the moment.
Excellent. And you're very hard at work, working for youth work globally. Can you tell us a bit more about that? What's your job? What is your passion?
Yeah, basically my passion for youth work, you're breaking up a little bit there, Sian, but my passion for youth work stemmed from a very young age for lots of variety of reasons. I think personal experience for me was definitely a key contributor. You know, I grew up in the northeast, one of the areas that's faced the biggest austerity measures in terms of youth work, but a lot of other key essential services as well. At school, I was often dubbed the challenging individual, and we hear the same sort of dismissive language used to describe young people today. And I think because of this, you know, I spent more time out of school than in some weeks, and the youth club was the only place for me to go. And I think I was personally devastated when lack of funding meant that my youth club had to close, and I know many other young people feel the same. In London now, I work with so many young people all over the world who are in or have been in similar situations, and it's great to help young people formulate their own opinions and paths in life, but more importantly, give them the power to shape their own lives. And I think the other reason that inspires my passion for youth work is just the transformative and real life impact it has on young people. And young people, you know, absolutely need to be taken as assets in this country rather than problems to be solved. And youth work just that, you know, it sees past putting people in boxes, and it gives young people a lifeline when so many other people have let them down.
Yeah, no, I as you know, I'm quite passionate about youth work as well. Now, I want to start by asking about the current crisis, because obviously a lot of youth work is place-based. I focus a lot on youth centres. That face-to-face support is really important to young people. How are youth services and youth work coping with the lockdown?
Yeah, I mean, we know that there's many issues that are affecting young people already. It starts from the very day young people are born. Young people face multiple obstacles and structural barriers from where they're born to what the family situation is like, their financial situation, what opportunities are available to them at the right time, you know, if they're lucky, if they know how to access those, to if they've got information from a reliable source. And many of these are completely out of their control, but they all have a systemic effect on their life chances. Time and time again, government civil society strategies fail to recognise these structural inequalities that we know exist for young people. And the impact of COVID-19 crisis are just heightening these issues for young people. And every effort is being made to continue vital support services by moving youth work online and, you know, adapting to digital engagement. But for lots of young people, there are huge barriers for digital engagement. And recent reports by UK Youth have revealed that, which is where I used to work, have revealed that youth services have been at the forefront of supporting the wider emergency response, redeploying their staff to distribute emergency care packages, support emergency services and transform their buildings into food banks in some communities. Like youth centres are really good support networks for communities, not just for young people in the area. So UK Youth have reported increased mental health and wellbeing concerns, increased loneliness and isolation, issues that we know are huge issues for young people anyway, anxiety about future jobs, money, and a lack of safe space for young people who often have challenging home lives and family environments. Yeah. Not to mention a higher risk of substance misuse, carrying weapons, sexual exploitation and grooming. And this, I can't put it lightly, like COVID-19 could absolutely devastate the sector. Like 88% of youth services have indicated that they're likely or very likely to reduce service provision. 31% that staff redundancies were likely, and 17% said that permanent closure was likely or necessary.
Yeah, no, it was challenging already. And I think the challenges of lockdown are really hitting home now. We've seen the same thing with youth focus diverted across the country. Looking at a report by Youth Link Scotland, similar to the UK Youth have been doing, interviewing people involved in youth work. It said that 9 in 10 of the services have done huge efforts to set up online youth work. But 6 in 10 was seeing young people struggling with digital barriers, with having access to tech, access to data, connectivity within their homes. I know some people are doing work on that. My own council's appealing for people to send in unwanted and unneeded laptops and tablets for young people to use. We've got, in Bristol, we've got Cleo Lake, who used to be the Lord Mayor of Bristol, doing a very similar initiative. Sandy Hall-Ruthven, who works in youth work. I don't know what it is about Greens and youth work, but anyway, Sandy Hall-Ruthven works in youth work, but also was our candidate for mayor in similar way as I was in the now postponed elections. He's been raising money to get digital tech to young people. I mean, this is the barrier, isn't it? The digital barriers that some young people have, we're also seeing in education as well. This is huge, isn't it? This is about inequality.
Yeah, it's huge. Like from my personal experience, my youth club has offered me essential life skills, which young people aren't necessarily getting anymore because they can't all be delivered online. Supportive network of peers and trusted adults, which often young people don't have at home, and the place that often believes in them when school teachers don't. And I know obviously education services are hit at the moment as well. And I think youth services just offer so much more for young people. It's not just about a safe place to go or, life skills. And I think that they include programs to improve employability, leadership, critical thinking, skills such as like financial literacy, music, arts and crafts, things that they don't learn in school. And what I do a lot in my work is youth voice, so offering young people a platform to develop and share their views and opinions in a safe and welcoming environment. Because often when young people are formulating opinions, they're often scared to really let those opinions shine because they're worried about what people might think of them, or worried about who might share that on social media. And actually in a youth club, that's a safe environment and a welcoming environment for them to express their views and formulate their own opinions. Yeah. So we do a lot of campaigns and advocacy projects with young people.
Fantastic. Okay, I'm going to go on to an even more sad topic now, which is the ongoing crisis. I mean, before this crisis started, there was already a crisis in youth work to do with funding. What do you experience about that and the effect of funding over the years?
Yeah, it's devastating. I think the tragic cumulative loss of 145 million in London that's been snatched away from our young people's hands in the last 7 years it's just a far cry from the 45 million and the 23 million this year that you've worked so hard to reinstate. And I think obviously this is so welcomed by the sector, it just scratches the surface of the total that's been lost. Which is often felt the hardest by the smaller locally run organisations. They've felt the strain the hardest. Where the funding cuts have hit the hardest is for open access youth services provision. So meaning that lots of work is now run through programmes for targeted groups, like I mentioned before. This is because, you know, youth work is just not like a one-time event or like a quick fix that can be solved, and it's really difficult to measure. Often takes years of intensive work with young people, particularly young people, to see a significant impact, much longer than a local authority election time, you know, win time period, for example. Many like local authorities just don't want to put that investment into youth services. They're often the first to be cut just because they're not seen as like an essential service and one that can provide quick results.
Yeah, no, I mean,
sorry, carry on.
Sorry. One of the reasons I started to work on youth service cuts was because young people basically just came to us in the 2016 election and said, no one's listening, our youth services are in crisis, there are cuts. And that's why I started measuring them. So just one moment while as you mentioned, like I've been working to try and get funding put into youth services, and part of that has been measuring the cuts every year. Now, I've been doing this since 2017 was the first report that came out. And this year I've done the same thing. Now, my report is finished, but it isn't published yet. And I do not want to scoop the people who have the report and will publish it. But I do want to share just one of the slides from my my work. So I'm going to share my screen now. So hopefully this will work. There we go. So that's interesting. Okay, that's worked. Okay, so here are the net youth service cuts versus 2011-12, and this is the staff cuts that we've seen. So what we've got here is 452 youth worker full-time jobs lost up to this year. This is the most recent data, but that's just across 16 councils in London that have managed to give us data for every single year. If we sorry, bit of a delay. If we may move to the next slide now, what we see is oh, hang on. There we go. What we see is 733 youth worker full-time posts lost. Now, that's an enormous amount. That's the impact of that. You cannot imagine. I'll ask you about that in a minute, Hannah. Moving on to the next slide, if I can get it to do it. So this is, we started this year to look at the long-term impact of this, and obviously once young people lose support, one of the things that can happen is they can get into trouble, and then they end up being referred into social services. So these are referrals into social services across the country, and the dark blue bars are for London. And again, what we can see is a steady increase in the number of referrals to children's social care services, and that to me, that just absolutely shows the long-term impact of these cuts. So moving back to you, Hannah.
Yeah, I mean, as we can see, it's not just young people who are hit, you know, youth workers are hit too by this crisis, and the whole community. We're seeing youth clubs at the moment are functioning as a real support network, a real hub in their local community, providing food banks and essential care support for their whole, you know, the whole area. But many qualified youth workers have lost their jobs, and youth services are relying on dedicated volunteers now to keep going. These are often people well known and well loved by so many people in their communities, and it's such a devastating situation for them. Now, I've noticed other impact of some of the cuts in my own work working with youth clubs all over the UK, because they've just become much more fractured. Not everywhere has a youth club, not everywhere has standardised provision for young people, not everywhere has enough provision for young people, and it's just look at the draw, you know, whether you have a good youth club or a good youth service in your area, or that the area has enough funding available for your youth service. And I think rather than work in partnership with other essential services, the cuts have forced many youth services to be competitive for funding, meaning that young people in certain areas where the youth services aren't as developed are just always left behind.
Yeah, no, I often working with London youth as well. One of the ways they talk about youth workers is that sort of third service that young people need. You know, you've got your adults in your life that are your teachers and your parents, and then you've got, in terms of public services, social services if you get into trouble, but you also need that more youth-centred individual mentoring and support from a non-judgmental adult, and that's your youth workers. They're I think so important to young people, like you said at the beginning. So what can we do about this? What's going to improve things, Hannah?
Well, I think, you know, definitely we want to see the only way to tackle this problem is by lobbying for the Mayor's Young Learners Fund to reinstate the entirety of the cuts to our youth services. But before that happens, I think actually it's likely to get worse. And I think there's going to be further funding cuts to the sector, especially in light of the COVID-19 crisis. I think the bottom line is we're going to see more of the same, which is so disappointing for young people everywhere. Rates of mental health problems, suicide in young people are at an alarming rate already. Violent crime continues to rise, and we'll see skills gaps in creative and vocational industries, which have been lost by this, you know, skills gaps in the youth services. And I think with a fractured political system in the UK, like, there's no likelihood of a long-term vision for youth services at the time being. And I think a long-term vision would enable the development of a framework and a strategy for key outcomes for young people to transform to adulthood successfully. But at the moment, we're seeing that youth services are just pushed and pulled to win election points. And rather than that, it should be a public health approach, which with buy-in from all political parties across all government departments. And that's the only way to tackle the deeply ingrained issues facing young people today, and to give the investments that we need.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned there the Young Londoners Fund that the Mayor set up. I mean, to his credit, he did that after, you know, seeing the impact and the numbers that we put together, showing what had been cut around London. But yeah, that's currently, let me get this right, £70 million in total that's gone in. That's really good, but it's not anything like the amount that's been pulled out. Really, we need government to start seeing this as important as schools, as important as social care, and not to keep cutting away at council budgets.
Yeah, right now there's an absolute need for urgent emergency funding to be able to keep the doors open long term for youth services who are providing support networks, not much for young people but for the whole community through COVID-19, but also like mid to long term funding that will allow them to eventually reopen and resume business as usual. And I also believe in putting the power in the hands of young people. So through these difficult times, you know, ensuring that the beneficiaries of youth services are consulted through advisory capacities about specific and ever-changing needs of young people that need to be invested in. And also,
sorry, that's a really good point, because like people my age can sit there all day going, what young people need is X, Y, and Z. And actually, I'm totally out of touch as far as being a young person is concerned these days. You have to involve them in planning and delivering the services themselves.
So obviously, you know, I'm 30, you know, in my work, I involve younger people all of the time. Like actually, we run programs for young people, but before we even do that, we get young people to design and write those programs, to think about the activities that they would like to do, to actually design their own campaigns. We just give them the tools that they need to be able to do that.
What I wouldn't give to be able to just create a national youth work service and put young people in charge of it. I mean, how amazing would that be?
Yeah.
One day we'll get there, Hannah. We'll just all keep plugging away in our jobs, working, you know, as you do for charities, for organisations delivering on the ground, and in politics we'll also keep pushing away, because it does make
yeah. And I think just finally, I think actually what the mayor hasn't recognised recently, and I think what you know, will need to be lobbied towards him, you know, in the coming months, is actually that reinstating youth services will just relieve so many other areas of City Hall work. Mental health services, the NHS, children's services, youth offending services, because youth services underpin so many other essential services in young people, and like statutory funding in all areas of London to ensure no young people are left behind, and to ensure the competitive tendering is just a thing of the past, is the way we need to go.
Oh yes, good point. Short-term grants, they're just they're the worst in any area of charity. It's yes, we need long-term, secure funding so that people can plan what's actually needed, as opposed to scrabbling around and competing with each other. That's wrong. Right, Hannah, I'm gonna have to let you go. It's time to, we've run out of time. 25 past 11 coming up. But thank you so much for coming on. It's been really nice to talk to you, and we'll see you back in London, back on Campaign Trail, hopefully next year.
Yeah, it's been wonderful to see you, and thank you very much for having me on the show. Thank you, Hannah.
Right, back to my I haven't said goodbye yet, and I'm going to do that. So yeah, thank you very much, Hannah, for coming in. Next week it's half term, there are no assembly meetings, so I'm going to take a week off the programme, a week off properly. In fact, I'm going to get some exercise. You'll see this flat coming back considerably tidier than before, and I'm going to look after my own mental health, like we all need to do. Everything needs to be thought about at the moment, and I'm going to be running around being kind to everybody as well. So in 2 weeks' time we'll be back, and we'll be focusing on the creative industries and the arts, both of which are doing so much good work during lockdown, but also facing an incredibly uncertain future. So we'll have some excellent people and some excellent things to see in 2 weeks' time. Meanwhile, look after yourselves, be excellent to each other, and goodbye.